Sintra Corporation's boardroom might be glittering, but in its shadows lies a web of corruption that only one person dares to expose. Alexandra Alex Monroe built Sintra with integrity, then handed the reins to her brother Derek. But when whispers of misconduct surface, Alex returns, this time as ally, a cleaner invisible to the powerful but fully aware of their wrongdoings. Chief among them is Ryan Holt, the arrogant COO whose manipulation of both finances and people has driven Sintra into a moral abyss. As Alex gathers evidence, she faces a critical decision: protect her family or expose the truth that could tear it apart. When Alex reclaims her true role, Sintra will never be the same, and neither will the people who dared to cross her. Alex stepped into Sintra's glossy lobby, her face hidden beneath the brim of her cap. Clad in the plain blue cleaner's uniform, she was unrecognizable from the polished CEO she had once been. As she moved through the bustling reception, two junior employees in business attire passed by, murmuring about Sintra's new so cracking down hard. Another round of layoffs, one whispered. Only if you're in his way, the other replied, shaking his head. Holt doesn't care who he pushes out. Alex kept her face neutral, feeling a spark of anger at how much had changed since she'd left. It was time to see firsthand how deep the rot had spread. Pushing her cart along the executive corridor, Alex tried to appear unremarkable. As she passed by Ryan Holt's office, he emerged with a click of his expensive shoes, his gaze locking onto her. "You," he said sharply, eyeing her up and down. "You missed a spot." Alex raised her eyes and glanced at the spotless floor. "Yes, sir," she said evenly, keeping her tone humble as she reached for her mop. Ryan smirked, crossing his arms. "Ally, right? You should be grateful for this job. Not everyone gets to be here." Alex gritted her teeth, forcing a polite nod. She'd built this company, and here he was, lecturing her like an outsider. His arrogance, however, only strengthened her resolve. Later that day, Alex swept past a team of employees huddled in the lounge, talking in hushed voices. A young analyst spoke up. "He tore apart my last project. It was solid work, but he's relentless. Doesn't care about anyone who isn't a suit." Another employee sighed. "Everyone's scared of Holt. And the CEO? He's just absent." Alex's heart sank, knowing they were talking about Derek. She caught a glimpse of him through a glass wall as he walked briskly past, his expression weary. He looked more withdrawn than she'd ever seen him, stirring doubts about whether he even realized what was happening under his leadership. Ryan cornered her in the break room later, a sly smile on his face. "Ally, right?" "Yes," she replied, her tone neutral, hoping he'd move on. But he didn't. "You know," he leaned closer, his eyes narrowing, "a woman like you could make things easier for herself." He let the words hang in the air, his smirk deepening as she avoided his gaze. "Thank you," she said quietly, though every nerve in her body screamed at her to confront him. Instead, she held back. She had a larger purpose here, one she couldn't risk by losing her composure now. That evening, she met with Derek in her small apartment, out of sight of the office. "It's worse than I thought, Derek. Ryan's, he's tearing down everything we built," she said, voice filled with tension. Derek sighed, rubbing his temples. "Ryan's aggressive, yes, but he gets results, Alex. You know how competitive this field is." Alex looked at him with frustration. "But at what cost? I saw how he treats people. And the morale. Everyone's afraid." Derek gave her a sympathetic but weary look. "Just be careful, all right? We don't need a scandal right now." Alex clenched her fists under the table, her determination stealing. If Derek wouldn't listen, she'd find the proof to make him see. As Alex scrubbed the windows of the executive floor, she overheard two employees discussing recent decisions affecting the company. "Did you hear about the budget cuts?" one whispered. "They're slashing team resources again, but somehow the executive bonuses remain untouched." "Typical," the other replied bitterly. "And when complaints go up the chain, they disappear. Ryan's got it all under control. No one dares challenge him." Alex absorbed this, frustration rising. The decisions were reckless, undermining the hard-working staff who made Sintra's success possible. She knew Ryan had far too much control, but the extent of it was troubling. While tidying the hallway near the marketing offices, Alex witnessed a heated exchange between Ryan and Miss Theobald, the head of marketing. She lingered discreetly, listening. "Your department's budget was a mess last quarter," Ryan snapped, his voice low but menacing. Miss Theobald rolled her eyes. "I've told you, we need those resources. You're putting the company's reputation at risk." Ryan leaned in close. "And I'll remind you, I run this place. You're here because I allow it. Keep your mouth shut and follow orders." When he turned and saw Alex, he sneered. "Move along, cleaner," he barked. Miss Theobald shot Alex a condescending look, reinforcing her complicity in Cintra's toxic culture. During her break, Alex sat beside a young analyst, Carly, in the lounge. Sensing the woman's frustration, she gently started a conversation. "Long day?" Alex asked. Carly sighed. "More like a long month. Ryan's impossible. He drove my friend out last week with all his demands. She was one of the best here." Alex's expression softened. "I'm sorry. It must be hard to work under someone like that." Carly nodded. "It's not just him, though. Derek. I thought he'd do something by now. We all did. But he's just as absent as the rest." Alex's heart sank, feeling both guilty and resolute. She was beginning to see the full picture, and how much Ryan's unchecked power had corroded Cintra's core. Later, as Alex polished the glass outside the conference room, she caught fragments of a tense conversation between Derek and Ryan. "Ryan, our expenses are spiraling out of control. You can't keep approving these bonuses without considering the company's overall health," Derek argued, frustration in his tone. Ryan chuckled dismissively. "Derek, you're not seeing the big picture. Retention for top execs keeps this place running. Let the little things slide. They don't matter." Alex's hands stilled on the glass, fury building. Ryan had manipulated Derek, using corporate jargon to justify his actions. The dismissive attitude toward little things revealed his lack of respect for Cintra's employees. That evening, Alex sat with Derek at her apartment. She explained what she'd observed about Ryan's stranglehold over finances, decisions, and even the people. "You're right. Something isn't adding up. But Ryan insists he has Cintra's best interests at heart," Derek sighed. "Derek," Alex said softly, but with conviction, "Ryan's destroying what Cintra stands for. You need to question him before it's too late." Derek seemed torn. "I'll think about it," he replied, but Alex could see the doubt still lingering in his eyes. She knew her work was far from over. If Derek couldn't see the full scope, she'd have to find undeniable proof. While wiping down a conference room, Alex observed Ryan chewing out a junior staff member over an innocent mistake. "This isn't some playground, Daniel," Ryan sneered. "If you can't handle a basic task, you're in the wrong place." The young man mumbled an apology, looking down. Ryan turned to Alex, watching her with a cold smirk. "Better keep your head down too, ally. People here don't last if they step out of line." Alex's jaw tightened as she nodded. She realized Ryan thrived on intimidation and was untouchable due to his position. This abuse of power was becoming clearer every day, deepening her resolve to bring him down. Late that evening, Alex took a risk. Using her access badge, she entered Ryan's office and quickly located his financial files. As she scanned through them, the discrepancies were glaring: personal expenses, unauthorized transactions, and even what appeared to be falsified budget cuts. Footsteps in the hallway made her heart race. She hastily closed the files, muttering, "How has no one caught this?" Taking a deep breath, she reminded herself she needed more evidence. This was just the beginning. The next day, Alex approached Mr. Carter, the head of finance, who was chatting with another executive. As she adjusted his office trash can, she casually remarked, "You finance folks must have a tough job, balancing all those numbers." Mr. Carter's smile faded. "It's not as simple as you might think. Bet the COO's expenses are tricky to justify," Alex said, probing gently. Mr. Carter's eyes narrowed. "Stay in your lane, ally. You don't know what you're talking about." His dismissive tone only increased her suspicion. It seemed Mr. Carter was involved, or at the very least, turning a blind eye to Ryan's manipulation. That afternoon, as she passed the marketing office, Alex overheard Ryan's voice through the slightly open door. "You know the drill. Theobald, don't ask questions, and keep your complaints to yourself if you want to keep your job. Miss Theobald replied hesitantly, but some of this just feels wrong, Ryan. You think I care about your feelings? Ryan snapped. You'll do as I say, or I'll find someone who will. Alex's fists clenched. It was clear that Miss Theobald was aware of unethical practices, but too intimidated to resist. The corruption was more pervasive than she'd imagined. That evening, Alex met Derek again, trying to relay her findings. Derek, I'm telling you, Ryan is abusing company funds and intimidating staff. And he's got others either complicit or too scared to speak up. Derek sighed. Alex, I get it, but these are serious accusations. I can't just take action without concrete proof. Concrete? Alex's voice rose in frustration. How much more do you need? Cintra's sinking because of his corruption. Derek looked away. I'll look into it. But don't push too hard, Alex. We have to be careful. She left feeling exasperated. Derek's hesitation was costing Cintra dearly. If he wouldn't listen, she'd have to keep digging alone. Alex's quiet observations hadn't gone unnoticed. One afternoon, Ryan caught her eye as she walked past his office, a calculating look crossing his face. Ally, isn't it? He called out. She nodded, her heart racing. Yes, sir. He stepped closer, his gaze sharp. Funny, you always seem to be around. Almost like you're watching us. His tone dripped with suspicion. Just doing my job, she replied coolly, though tension coiled within her. Ryan's eyes narrowed, but he let her go. She could feel his scrutiny intensify as she walked away, knowing she'd need to be more careful from now on. After hours, Alex slipped into Ryan's office, her pulse steady as she opened his filing cabinet. She meticulously copied files detailing transactions and questionable expenses, her suspicions turning into solid proof. Her hands shook as she realized just how deep his deception ran. Suddenly, a sound in the hallway made her freeze. She quickly closed the drawer and tucked the copied files into her jacket. The evidence she'd gathered was damning, but she knew she needed to tread carefully. The next day, Ryan found her alone in the hallway. He smirked, stepping uncomfortably close. You're awfully curious, Ally. Not a trait that serves well here. Alex's expression didn't falter. I'm just a cleaner, sir. Nothing more. Ryan leaned in, his voice a low threat. Keep it that way, or you might find yourself without a job, and without any friends to help. He let the warning linger, his gaze cold as he walked away. Her pulse pounded, but she refused to back down. She had enough evidence now. It was time to take action. As she passed by the conference room later, she overheard Derek defending Ryan's actions to another board member. Ryan's aggressive, yes, but his methods work. He's been essential for Cintra's growth, Derek argued, his tone defensive. Alex's stomach twisted. Had Derek really become blind to Ryan's corruption? His words reflected either loyalty or fear. Either way, it deepened her doubts about his leadership. It was clear she couldn't rely on him to take the first step. That night, Alex reflected on everything she'd uncovered. Derek's reluctance, Ryan's threats, and the evidence she now held. Her chest tightened as she realized the cost her investigation might impose on her family, particularly on Derek. Am I willing to do this? She whispered to herself, a flicker of doubt crossing her face. But in her heart, she knew the answer. If she wanted to save Cintra and Derek, she couldn't turn back. Late one evening, Ryan cornered Alex in the parking garage. His eyes were cold, his tone menacing. You think you're smart, don't you, Ally? He sneered, his voice echoing in the empty space. She kept her expression calm. I don't know what you mean, Mr. Holt. Don't play games, he growled. If you don't meet me in my office after hours, I'll make sure you're out of here tomorrow morning. No one's going to hire you after I'm done. Alex felt her pulse quicken, but she stood her ground. Thank you for the advice, she replied evenly, walking away before he could see the tremor in her hands. The time had come to expose him. The next morning, Alex met Derek at her apartment, her voice filled with urgency. Derek, I have proof. Ryan's stealing from the company and using his position to harass staff. He threatened me last night. Derek looked startled, then defensive. Alex, you can't just throw around accusations. Think of Cintra's reputation. I am thinking of it, she replied, frustration flaring. Ryan's tearing it apart from the inside, and you're letting him? Derek shook his head. I'll look into it, but we need to be careful. We can't risk bad publicity. Her heart sank, realizing Derek was more concerned with appearances than action. As they sat in silence, Alex's frustration boiled over. Why are you defending him, Derek? I thought you cared about Cintra's values. Derek ran a hand through his hair. I do, Alex, but this is complicated. We've grown because of Ryan's strategies. You don't understand the pressures. Don't understand? She shot back. I built this company, Derek. I know its values better than anyone. You're letting him destroy everything we stand for. Derek avoided her gaze, conflicted. I can't act without solid, irrefutable proof, Alex. Then I'll get it, she replied firmly, a new resolve hardening in her voice. If Derek wouldn't act, she'd go over his head. Later that day, Alex anonymously contacted Cintra's board members, attaching evidence of Ryan's financial misconduct and abuses. In her message, she requested an emergency meeting to discuss the urgent matter affecting the company's integrity. As she hit send, she felt a mix of fear and relief. She'd set everything in motion now. The board would demand answers, and she would be there to deliver them in person. The thought of finally facing Ryan and revealing her identity filled her with both dread and anticipation. The next morning, Alex arrived at Cintra, no longer dressed as Ally the cleaner but as Alexandra Monroe, founder and rightful leader. She entered the boardroom where the board members, Ryan and Derek, were gathered, her heels clicking with purpose. Ryan sneered, not yet realizing who she was. Are you lost, sweetheart? This isn't a place for the help. She stood beside Derek, meeting Ryan's gaze head-on. Actually, Mr. Holt, she announced, I'm exactly where I need to be. I'm Alexandra Monroe, the true owner of Cintra, and I'm here to clean up this mess. The room fell silent, Derek's face pale, and Ryan's confidence visibly crumbling as he realized the gravity of the situation. The boardroom was silent as Alex laid out her findings. She looked directly at Ryan, her voice steady. You've abused your power, embezzled funds, and created a hostile environment. This ends now. Ryan attempted a smirk. You don't know what you're talking about, Miss Monroe. Alex held up the documents she'd gathered. Oh, I do. These are copies of your unauthorized expenses, misused company funds, and complaints from harassed employees. She looked at the board. Cintra deserves better than this. Ryan's confidence wavered, realizing he'd been cornered. The board members exchanged uncomfortable glances, acknowledging the weight of Alex's evidence. Ryan scoffed, attempting to regain control. Everyone bends the rules a little. It's part of how business is done at this level. Not in my company, Alex replied firmly. Cintra was built on integrity, not exploitation. Derek, visibly shaken, interjected. Ryan, is this true? He looked to Alex, guilt shadowing his expression. I trusted you. Ryan sneered. Face it, Derek. You never had the backbone to lead. You needed me to get things done. But his defiance crumbled as Alex's evidence spoke for itself, and Derek's eyes hardened with realization. Alex addressed the board, her tone resolute. Those complicit in fostering this toxic culture will no longer be part of Cintra. She announced the dismissals of Ryan and Miss Theobald, sending a clear message. Security escorted Ryan from the room as he sputtered protests. Miss Theobald, watching the scene in stunned silence, reluctantly followed. Alex turned to the remaining board members. We're starting fresh, rebuilding Cintra as a company that values integrity above all. The relief and determination in the board's faces showed their readiness to embrace her vision. After the meeting, Alex and Derek found a quiet room to talk. Derek's shoulders slumped as he confessed, I didn't know how to handle everything. I thought Ryan was helping, but I let you down, Alex. Alex placed a hand on his shoulder. I understand. I know it wasn't easy, but you have to be vigilant about who you trust in leadership. She softened, seeing the regret in his eyes. I want you to step down, Derek. I'll take over and set things right, but I'll need your support. Derek nodded, visibly relieved. I'll back you, Alex. Sintra deserves someone like you. In the weeks that followed, Alex began restructuring Sintra, bringing in ethical leadership and implementing programs that valued employees. The transformation was slow, but morale lifted and productivity flourished. During a company-wide meeting, Alex addressed the team. Sintra is more than just a company. It's a community. We'll move forward with respect and innovation at our core. The employees cheered, their renewed faith in Sintra evident. Alex looked out at them, filled with hope. She had reclaimed her company, and now, with Derek's support and a fresh team, she was ready to lead Sintra into a brighter future.